Hey folks, hope you're all doing well and welcome back to the channel. So today we got the Ultimate Showdown, two of the greatest albums from Black Sabbath. As far as I'm concerned, two of the greatest albums by any band. We're looking at Heaven and Hell versus the Mob Rules. We're going to talk about both albums, going to do a bit of a deep dive on both records and then go through all the tracks and then let you know at the end which one we prefer. So to help me in that endeavor, I have Mr. Martin Popoff and Mr. P. Pardo. How are you gentlemen doing?
Doing good. Ready to talk some Sabbath.
Ready to talk some Sabbath. All right. Before we get started on this, I just wanted to make a quick announcement. I noticed that 80% of the people that watch my content are not subscribed. So if you wouldn't mind subscribing, that would very much help the channel. Be much appreciated, and it doesn't cost you a dime. And let's see if we can get these numbers up. Much appreciated. All right, that out of the way. Okay, so let's talk about Heaven and Hell. Now, it came out in 1980, so you guys are the experts. What was going on in 1980? It was the birth of the new wave of British heavy metal. So you've got Iron Maiden is out, right? You've got Def Leppard is out, right? Saxon is in there. Motorhead, of course, is in there. So in that context, when this album hit, and keeping in mind that this was, I mean, let's face it, Black Sabbath was sort of on the decline, right? And the impact that this album had, like in the context of that time period, what are your feelings or impressions on this album sort of dropping right in the middle of that?
Pete, you want to take that one first?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much at this time, I think you have to say that Judas Priest is your kind of like de facto metal band on the planet right now. You know, you got Judas Priest and Van Halen, who are maybe not quite metal, but close enough, right? Sabbath's been like kind of like a non-entity for a number of years. And I remember at the time I first started getting into Sabbath, probably right around 1978, 1979, with the early Ozzy records. And then all of a sudden they announced this new Black Sabbath album, Heaven and Hell. And I remember buying this and thinking, that's not Ozzy. That's that Dio guy from Rainbow. And this is really fast and heavy and not slow and doomy. And this kind of fits in with everything else that's going on in metal right now, because everything coming out of, the UK is very, very different from, and Martin and I did a whole show on this a couple of months ago where we talked about the US kind of heavy metal scene, like in the late 70s. And this is just very, very different. But I think this is the album that saved Black Sabbath's career. And yes, it's very different. I know there's some purists, they say, well, this isn't really Black Sabbath anymore. But as we've known all these decades, right, this is Black Sabbath. This is just a different iteration. Tony's still there. Geezer's still there. Bill's still there for a little bit. And this new guy brought something very, very different to the band. And I think it really worked and struck a real chord with people. So all of a sudden, Black Sabbath became relevant once again in this new age where people are looking to listen to faster, more aggressive, heavier music or heavier metal. And Black Sabbath is playing around with all the young upstarts right off the bat with this album.
Yeah, it's like they came in sort of in that new thrust of heavy metal and kind of planted their flag, like we're still here and we're still in the running here.
That's a good way of putting it, because I remember getting this. I can still picture it walking into A&B Sound in Vancouver, which was the big, massive seller of new releases. It was always the best price, right? And I remember walking in and seeing a stack of them straight up like this in almost like a little, you know what those like those luggage things look like at the airport, the one where you're supposed to measure how big your bag is, right?
Yeah.
Metal frame thing. It looked like that, right? And I remember plucking one off the top and flipping it over and seeing that drawing on the back. But it's funny now thinking back, I've never really thought about this, but so yeah, it's April 1980. So there you go. It's April 1980. And so you're right at the beginning of the new wave of British heavy metal. And this idea of this band comes in, and I remember, getting that in Vancouver, and just it's almost like a big hard rock metal story. Like it's divorced from the new wave of British heavy metal for the moment. But it's a big story along with, Bon Scott into AC/DC. We've got a Rainbow album at this point. We've got, the other big one's going to be British Steel. And what this felt like is now after, you go home, you go to Spokane, you're buying Sounds magazine and stuff. Now Sabbath is right in there like a dirty shirt with all these.
Yeah.
So yeah, you've got Rainbow in there, Scorpions with Animal Magnetism, and all of a sudden it almost felt like this upgrade of the band to this bright, snappy, heavy, bang 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 sound, rather than being almost like the krautrock band that Sabbath was on Never Say Die. Here they are suddenly competing with all this, and they're right in there, and they're touring with those guys, and there's pictures of the band, and they look young and vital, and great pictures of the band right at the beginning. They just looked like ready to take on the world, sort of thing. So yeah, that's the context. Iron Maiden is early. I think Iron Maiden is April 80 as well. But yeah, Tigers of Pantang is arriving in 80, like you say, Hack. You got two Saxon albums out of Saxon in 80. You've got Motorhead's just put out 2 albums in 79. Ace of Spades is 80. This was literally I kind of look at this is April 18th, 1980. I can't think of almost like a better time to say
exactly
really exciting birth of new wave of British heavy metal right now, April 1980.
Yeah, it couldn't come at a better time. I just wanted to say thank you to Waste Some Time with Average Joe for the super chat. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, it's like they just kind of just boom, they just wedged their way in there, and they became part of the crowd, and at the forefront. I mean, it's like we invented this thing, now we're going to push it into the next decade. I mean, it was perfect, right? And the other part of that as well is the difference in the songwriting and the impact of having Dio in the band, because they weren't the same Sabbath as those 70 records. Like Pete, you mentioned about the slow kind of doomy sort of thing. I mean, they were doing a lot more upbeat, fast stuff on these records, right? Of course, the lyrical content was miles away. Now they're talking about kings and queens and seas, stormy seas and all this kind of the Ronnie thing, right? I mean, they were a different band, and musically they became a different band lyrically, and it just really fit perfectly with the music that was coming out at the time, right? And I mean, for me, and I'm kind of going to go out on a limb here, all right, but I'm going to say it, my favorite Dio period is this period with Sabbath over any Dio record, Rainbow, anything. For me, this is the best of Dio and the best of Sabbath all merged into one. Absolutely love this period, man.
Cool.
All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna go through the track list. Okay, we're gonna do Heaven and Hell. We're gonna talk about that. We're gonna go through the track list 2 at a time of the Mob Rules, and just a general discussion on the tracks as we go around. And then at the end, and I think probably most people already here already know what our favorites of these two are, but we'll save that for the very end. So starting off with Heaven and Hell, you've got the opening track, Neon Nights, and you've got Children of the Sea. Go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, so Neon Nights, great punchy opener. The band is like bright, ready to take on the world. As I was saying, it's such a contrast with the opening track, the title track of Never Say Die. But they start that album off with a fast one as well. But you just hear so much of a difference. This raise in professionalism. Martin Birch is producing. It's really punchy. It's got kind of like a vital, tight, high bottom end to it, but not a lot of bottom end. It's definitely not sort of plush and boomy. It's just really almost like this is punk rock Black Sabbath, but it's bright, right? And it's everybody's so tight. You're not really hearing the things that you would normally say about Bill Ward's personality on this. It's just this great freight train drumming happening on it. It almost sounds like a sober and super healthy Bill Ward, but we know that's not the case. I mean, he was in really rough shape at this time, but yeah, great. I love the guitar solo on it. Really great melodic solo on this as well. It's my second favorite song on the album. Then you go into Children of the Sea and they slow right down. It's got a great sort of accessible but still slow and doomy Sabbath riff. It's got the solo that's over this kind of echoey angels chanting sort of sound that goes on when you get to the solo, and it's kind of like a pomp rock structure that they do there. It's really kind of classical, so it's neat. In a lot of cases on this album, when they get to the solo, they do come up with some new music to put it over, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
You know, the mellow beginning. You know, one thing I noticed playing it back today, and I couldn't unhear this. I don't want to ruin this album for anybody. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but I found like the bass, the articulation on the bass was too high in the mix, and I was being distracted by the bass parts because they're super, super easy to hear. You could hear exactly what Geezer's doing all throughout. So they're up in the mix in volume, and they're very articulated, and he plays a little busy, right? He'll play little bass fills, right? So yeah, you really hear that on this one and on the next one. So there's my first two tracks.
All right, cool. What about you, Pete?
So, all right. So, Lady Evil, exactly what Martin just said. I think that are we going?
We'll do the two. We'll do those two, Neon Knights and Children of the Sea, and then we'll go through them two at a time.
Gotcha. Okay, I'll say what I'm going to say till later. Yeah, I mean, Neon Knights to me is a banger of an opener, and I think one out of all these bands that we've talked about over the last couple of minutes, one of the heaviest songs I think on any of these albums. And I think just it's an absolute crusher. And interestingly enough, they would do something very, very similar on the next album. But I think Sabbath has always been really good about having opening tracks that are really hard hitting. Like Martin said, love the guitar soloing from Tony. I mean, he's playing some different shit on this album.
Yeah.
He is like playing with a vengeance, unlike we've ever heard before from him on any Sabbath album. And I really like that. I mean, it's good that he's showing us some different tricks and twists here. So great song. Love the vocal. Really good. You know, Martin mentioned Geezer. Geezer's really up front in the mix on this album, like big time. I don't really mind it too much because I think Tony is. I think one of the things I like about this album, and I'm sure we'll talk a bit about the production by Martin Birch of this album and the next one. This is a very dry production from Martin, I think. It's very different from Mob Rules, but it's not that I don't like it because I do, and I think Tony's guitar riffs and solos are just perfectly executed in the mix. I think Geezer is, how many times over the years have we said about certain bands, it's like the music's great, the riffs are great, but man, I can't hear the bass player. Not on this album. I mean, You hear him front and center on here. I think Bill is sounding really good. Maybe I missed that kind of little jazzy swing of Bill's playing from some of the earlier albums, but I don't think these songs are necessarily good vehicles for that style of drumming. Maybe on a couple tracks, maybe on the title track, which we'll talk a little bit. But yeah, Neon Knights is great. Children of the Sea, also something very different for them. I mean, this is melodic. It's the use of chords that Tony's using in the beginning, the way that Ronnie's just kind of building this vocal tapestry over it. Really different, just kind of epic sounding and dreamy, yet potent at the same time. And I don't think Sabbath's ever done a song like this before. Again, this is the kind of thing we would see from Ronnie going forward, not only in Sabbath, but certainly in the Dio band. But a terrific song. And again, I remember the first time I heard it, I was kind of like, wow, it's like if someone told me or played me this song and didn't tell me who it was, I would never in a million years guess it was Sabbath. But now we look back on songs like this and we deem this classic sounding Sabbath stuff. So yeah, first two tracks, absolutely classic right off the bat.
I couldn't agree more. They're absolutely killer. Neon Knights, I mean, with that heavy riffing and Dio's vocal, my God, could you imagine a better singer for that song than Dio? On every one of these songs, he just absolutely delivers. He's in the pocket. I remember like reading an interview with Tony Iommi saying, when they were asking him what the difference is between, say, Ozzy singing and Dio singing, where Ozzy would sing to the riff and Dio would sing to the chords. I mean, there's a perfect example. You've got this riff and he's carving out this fantastic melody. And I mean, it's just a killer in your face, just heavy, aggressive. And he mentioned the solos, fantastic. Martin, you were saying Geezer's bass playing was a little up in the mix. One of the reasons that I love this record is because I can hear Geezer, and I can because there is a lot of times where he's just doubling Tony, but there's a lot of times, man, where he's doing these really beautiful fills, and he's going up high on the neck, and he's just playing these nice little accents that just really take the song to the next level. And it would be a shame not to be able to hear that stuff. So I love the fact that he's up in the mix. Children of the Sea, I mean, there's your light and shade, there's your more Dio influence. Apparently that's the first song they wrote to. I guess that they were saying, I read that song was kind of already written before Dio came in, so I don't know how much he had to do with sort of the, you know, the light and shade, the mellow and the heavy part, but yeah, just, I mean, what a way to start a record. I mean, those two songs already top shelf Sabbath, man. Just amazing stuff. Amazing. All right. So now we got Lady Evil and Heaven and Hell.
Yeah, you know, it just to leave before we leave Children of the Sea, it's like I just can't unhear that you know, the demons that you know, the little bass fill in the triplets, right? It's like, no, it's too much, or it's too high in the mix or something, right? I don't know. Anyways, we get to Lady Evil. This is like a groovy butt shaking sort of song. I've always liked this song a lot, but here's where I want to mention something that I feel like there's a bit of a fall down of Sabbath when you get to this. I feel like Sabbath in this era is like too self-aware. They're on their way to the Tony Martin years, but they're not quite there. Like they're getting a little like sort of spooky, oh, here's a horror tale for you sort of thing. Whereas on Never Say Die, you know, everything is really creative and strange and creepy sort of sounding, right? It's like this is they're saying some weird things here. You could tell there's a lot of trauma going on. So I really feel like that there was this much higher level of creativity on all the 70s albums. And when you get into the 80s, Sabbath's a little self-aware. They're cleaning things up for sort of the marketplace. I think Lady Evil feels a little bit like one of those. And with Dio's sort of standard tale, you know, an interesting debate is this album, or how do you see this album as a follow-up to Long Live Rock and Roll, right? And I think it's so advanced. It sounds like it's a follow-up to Long Live Rock and Roll with like 3 albums in between it, sort of thing. Because Long Live Rock and Roll, when you play it against this album, that sounds pretty clanky, right? So yeah, that's that one. Heaven and Hell, one of the best riffs Tony ever did, absolutely. One of the most magic moments in music for me, and certainly for Sabbath, is the part at 4:21 where we get that pause and Bill starts doing the single stroke roll, and we're going to the speed up section, right?
Speeds up, yeah.
Comes in, you know, and that great chord sequence there. And then basically once it speeds up, it never goes back to the previous thing. And then we get that long acoustic medieval Renaissance music sort of coda, right? It's actually quite long. So it's kind of neat. So once they do the speed up thing, it's just the speed up thing, and then this quiet music, which is great. So yeah, so it's obviously a big and I want to mention one other thing. Neon Nights, I can't unhear because it's not even on this album, but every time I think of that song and the intro to that song, I think it, and then Vinny, you know, it's the Vinny version, right? When he throws in that super long cheesy fill to kick it off. I don't think it sounds very good when he does that, but yeah, there you go. That's the end of side 1.
All right, Pete, Lady Evil and Heaven and Hell.
I mean, that's the crazy thing about like all these songs, right? We're all so used to hearing Vinny playing them for decades, and it's hard when you go back to the original album here and you really like paying attention to the drums. It's like it's not how we're used to hearing them in a weird way. Yeah, Lady Evil is. I like the song. It's not one of my favorites on the album. I think to me, you know, side 1 is so epic, and that's probably the little kind of dip, but it's still a really good song. It's throbbing with bass. It's so groovy and chunky, right? You know, then here's Ronnie singing about magical, mystical women and whatnot.
Yeah.
It's a cool, fun song. It's just, to me, it's a little lighthearted compared to the 2 that come before and the one that come after it, but that's okay. And then, I mean, Heaven and Hell is just epic. It's one of the greatest songs ever recorded by this band or any other band. And I think to me, one of the greatest nights of my life was seeing the band reunited as Heaven and Hell playing at Radio City Music Hall.
Yeah.
And they played like a 20-minute version of this, and just seeing Ronnie up there and people were chanting his name, and you could tell he was so moved. And then Tony goes into this guitar solo, and we were all like, I mean, I was just brought to tears by it. And meanwhile, I had seen them play this before, but there was something about seeing them do it again together after so many years, which was really,
that's
really
cool.
Yeah, it's just such, like Martin mentioned, it's just a classic riff. It's a classic vocal. I'm not a lyric guy, but man, the lyrics to Heaven and Hell are so cool. You know, I mean, how many times in my life have I been talking to people about Sabbath? The world is full of kings and queens. Blind your eyes and steal your dreams. It's heaven and hell. It's it's something I've said a million times in my life, right? It's just, yeah, so important to me personally. I mean, this album, this song, this band, this lineup, right? So yeah, great song.
Yeah, I agree with you with Lady Evil. I mean, it's pretty hard to compete with Neon Knights and Children of the Sea. I mean, there's got to be, to maintain that level. So yeah, it is a little bit of a dip. It's not quite super top shelf, but it's not a bad track. It's okay. And I mean, Heaven and Hell is just, I mean, it's just a monster, And you mentioned earlier about Bill's sort of lack of swing on this record. And one thing because I was listening very closely to the drums on this record, because then I wanted to compare, a little bit of Bill to what Vinny does in the next one. And to me, Bill he's playing very conservatively, but he's playing the right stuff at the right time. But there's not a lot of flourishing going on. It's pretty straightforward what he's doing, which is good. And that's sort of the magic. And I'll talk about this more when we get to Vinny, because Vinny's a minimalist. And when you're playing this type of stuff and you're kind of holding back, it just makes everything bigger. You know what I mean? Because it lets everything breathe, and it just gives it more of an epic, sound overall. And yeah, I can kind of almost sense that Bill's stuff is very thought out and very methodical, and not so much, I'm just gonna, do my jazz thing, right? And you hear that. I mean, Heaven and Hell is, because there's a lot of place for Bill to go crazy there, and he's not doing it. So, but which again, I think lends to the song and just makes the song that much better and that much bigger. But yeah, Heaven and Hell is an absolute masterpiece. Yeah.
Nice.
All righty, now we're down to side 2. So we got Wishing Well and Die Young.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny on all of these, on both of these albums. The songs aren't in order on the back, right? That's another
messed up. That's why I wrote them down.
Yeah, that's not a normal Warner Brothers thing to do. I think there's certain labels that did that a lot more than others, but it's funny. But yeah, I'm looking at that drawing on the back. It's pretty wild. Bill Ward. We thought, he looks like a Scottish Terrier.
Yeah. No, I know that's Scottish.
There's my Geezer and Ronnie signed one.
Nice.
I'm missing Tony on this one, but I've got Ronnie and Vinny and Geezer on that one with the Hildebrand. So Wishing Well. I've always not liked this song that much, but I do like the creativity of it. It reminds me of The Who, The Real Me. Right, it's got that sort of feel to it. Pretty cool lyric, right? With the then think of a rainbow, I'll make it come real, right? And then I'll give you a star, or whatever it says there. Yeah, I'll give you a star. So you think stargaze or whatever, right? But yeah, pretty neat philosophical Ronnie lyric. I like the fact that it's different. It does break the doomy, serious / campy horror mode of Sabbath. It's a little more of the world, a little more philosophical. So it's pretty good. There's one later that I've always considered the same sort of thing. Like I've put them in the same box, and that one I like less. So Wishing Well, I do still quite like it. But yeah, very, very The Real Me. Die Young's my favorite song in the entire album. I love, for a second magic moment, I like at the 106 mark when you get that lead up to getting into the verse and Dio goes, "Ooh," right? Yeah, that cool part. That's my favorite part of the whole album. But I just love the chord movement on this, the speed of it. It's just got this really cool sort of passionate, dramatic, yet still melodic kind of sound to it. And the lyrics are really cool. Yeah, and I just like that it's kind of like a chordal wall of sound thing. It's not so much about a riff, right? It's about cool chords. Yeah, absolutely my favorite on the album.
All right, Pete, Wishing Well and Die Young.
Yeah, Wishing Well is also one of my least favorite tracks on the album. I still think it's good. It's a good, mid-tempo metal song. The riff is cool. It's just, to me, in this album of like so many classics, it's one of the three for me that stick out as being a little lackluster compared to the others. But what's somewhat lackluster for this band is great for any other band. So I don't dislike Wishing Well at all. It's just, I've been listening to this album since it first came out, and I've just never thought it really measures up to some of the other ones. But it's still it's a fine enough track. I like it. Die Young is absolutely top shelf. Along with the title track, Die Young is, one of the few absolute classics on this record, and it's a barn burner of a song. I love the little synth break. I love the lead guitars. I like the atmosphere in the song, and then some of it's really fast and heavy. And man, Tony's just smoking on this, and Ronnie's vocal is just great. It's just great, dramatic, emotional Sabbath, and it's a killer song. I think this is probably the one song on this album that I have consistently liked more and more as the years and decades have gone on. Because I think if we were to go back, 40 plus years, I really liked Die Young then. I absolutely love it now. So yeah, it's for me the sleeper song on this album.
Yeah. Wishing Well, I don't know, man. There's moments in that almost sound a little poppy around the chorus. It almost sounds like it doesn't belong with the rest of the songs on here. It's kind of an outlier a little bit to me, and to start the second side with it, I don't know, that
is weird. You're right. Yeah, that's really
you might
weird.
want to tuck that maybe near the end, like if you want to try something. I don't know, it just doesn't fit, but like you mentioned, Pete, Bad Song for Sabbath is a great song for most other bands, so I'm not totally dissing the song. It just where it's placed and in relation to the other tracks, it doesn't quite fit to me anyway. But then you got Die Young. That's just an absolute standout. There's that drama, there's that breakdown, like, oh my god, it's just the live version. You're mentioning Heaven and Hell. I have the Blu-ray of that concert, Heaven and Hell at Radio City, and that version of Die Young with because they extended a little bit and Tony's just going, and I'm like, oh my god, there's nothing better than this. Like, it's just the best, that is a killer. This record has got 4 absolutely top shelf best of Sabbath songs, and this is in there. This is one of them, maybe the best of all of them, even Heaven and Hell for me. I absolutely love this song, man. It's just, the breakdown, the light and the shade, the different moods, it's amazing. It's an amazing composition and arrangement. Fantastic. So there you go. All right, Walk Away and Lonely Is the Word.
Right. My 2 least favorite songs on the whole album. Walk Away is this album's Sensitive to Light, Starstruck, LA Connection, Run with the Wolf, basically on here. The lyrics are kind of like that, and this one's even more poppy, and it's got that kind of depressing poppy sort of chord thing to it. I don't know. It definitely rubs me the wrong way. And then Lonely is the Word is so funny in that it took me a few years to realize it's not a heavy song, right? Because it's got this strange way that it starts heavy. It starts like a slow Children of the Sea kind of heavy sort of song. And then at the 155 mark of a song that's 551, that just evaporates and we go into a mellow blues jam. For the rest of it. So this one, it's almost like, and then with the blues jam, it's the it's the Lars Ulrich drumming throughout it. It's like it's got stadium rock drums, while Tony's just doing this light kind of blues playing over. It's like Back to Rainbow. It's like Weisheim and Anybody There kind of thing, right? So it's a funny one. it's interesting to me, and I like respect it because it shows the wackiness of composition that you would get in the 70s from the band. Like it's just totally unexpected. But I don't enjoy it really particularly. So it is, those are my two least favorites. So yeah, so that means, this whole side is like three of them I'm not super massive fans of, and of course it's got Die Young on it. So it ain't the perfect album, right? It's definitely not a perfect album yet. It's just so revered. And so many, Sabbath fans of a younger generation, I know many of them will call this the greatest Sabbath album of all time.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Pete, what do you got? Walk Away and Lonely is the Word.
I mean, it's this whole concept of albums that are beloved because there are, and you called it, Hack, there are 4 drop dead classics on it.
Yeah.
So those 4 drop dead classics on it elevate it to the status, even though, as Martin mentioned, there's a few tracks on here that are really not all that great, right? They're good, but they're not great. But yet we hail this as one of the greatest Sabbath, and I do as well, one of the greatest Sabbath albums of all time because of those classic tracks. So yeah, Walk Away to me, I could take it or leave it. It's okay, right? It's along with Wishing Well and Lady Evil, I think those are easily the 3 weakest tracks on the record for me. It's okay. It's nothing spectacular. Now, Lonely as a Word is a song that I didn't like at all back 40 plus years ago. I was just kind of like, this is just this kind of throwaway bluesy ballad at the end. But, the older I get, I guess my taste changed a little bit. And I think Ronnie's vocal is outstanding on this. But man, Tony is killing it on here, playing this extended, long, bluesy solo. And it's just like, and he does it again. They replicate it almost to a T at the end of the next album, which we'll talk
over and
about.
over.
And I'm wondering if he may even eclipse the solo on that one. But for me, as someone who loves hearing great guitar solos, even though the song itself is nothing spectacular, it's got an amazing set of guitar solos on it. And for that, I have grown to really love it. It's still not up to Die Young, Children of the Sea, Heaven and Hell, and Neon Nights by any means, but it ends the album in an interesting way. And again, showing off how, I'm not saying Tony has increased his skills over the couple of years, since Never Say Die, but just Tony seems like he's got a fire lit under his butt on this whole album. And I'm all for it because he's one of my favorite guitar players of all time. And more Tony Iommi is always good. He's not just a riff guy. Here he's showing that he's a tremendous lead player all over this album.
He's using a lot of doubling too, a lot of reverb, heavy reverb or delay, I should say.
Yep.
Yeah, it's almost like he's discovered it because he's using it all over the place. Every solo on this record.
Yeah.
Walk Away. I mean, I really dig the riff. The riff is cool. I like the breakdown of it. The highlight for me is Geezer's bass playing on that is, I think, really, really cool. But again, look what you're competing with on that record. I mean, Die Young, Neon Nights. I mean, yeah, it's a dip again, right? You got Lady Evil is a dip. This to me is maybe an equal dip. I would say both for me are about at the same footing. And Lonely is the Word. Yeah, okay, so I'm almost thinking that, don't get me wrong, I love the big extended solo at the end because I'm a huge Tony Iommi guy. But for me, that almost sounds like an unfinished song. Maybe they couldn't come up with something else. So, hey, Tony, play us out. Right? Now, being a guitar player, I'm okay with that because, like I said, I'm a big Tony fan. But if I wasn't a big guitar guy, you know what? There's a piece missing. They didn't finish that song. It sounds uncompleted, to me, right? I know that I always get that. And maybe it's because some of the other songs are all the parts are so fantastic and the arrangements are great. And they got, and this just, it seems to lack that piece, of the puzzle to make it a, full composition. I don't know. Either way, I love the tag out. I want, I mean, who's going to complain about Tony playing a long solo? Sure as hell ain't me. So, but that's always the sort of the vibe I got from that song. But there you go. All right. So, there you go. So there's all our not ranking of the tracks, but what we thought of all the tracks. So what we're going to do is we're going to now do exactly the same thing on Mob Rules, and then at the end we are going to pick a favorite. So now that we're switching over to Mob Rules, I rarely, if ever, have anything to show for shows, but I have this. This is my original, and Pete saw this tour. We were talking about it earlier. This is my original Mob Rules tour book. This was C&E Grandstand. Would have been, I'm not sure, 81 or 82. Would have been 82. I don't know when they hit Toronto. But anyways, speaking of the monster, there he is right there. Look at that. There's the man.
Nice.
So,
yeah, I have that too. It's a great tour booklet.
Yeah, it's very cool. Very cool. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay, so I did the same thing here because on the back of the album, the songs are not written in the right order. So I listed the track listing here. So we'll do exactly the same thing. So we're into Mob Rules now. 1981. They put out Heaven and Hell. They're like fired up on all engines. Can they do it again with Mob Rules? Oh, yeah, they can. So let's start with Martin. So first two tracks, we got Turn Up the Night and Voodoo.
Yeah, so this was actually the first time I ever saw Sabbath too. I saw them in Vancouver, and they had the Outlaws supporting, but I didn't buy the tour book.
We had the Johnny Van Zant band. It's amazing how that almost that entire tour was.
I think I had that same, and I'm like, who the hell?
It was the Outlaws, Doc Holliday, or Johnny Van Zant band. They rotated them all depending on where.
Wow.
It might have been Johnny. I'd have to look it up, but I don't even remember the opening act. So there you go. What does that tell you?
Weird. Yeah. Okay, so Turn Up the Night. I love that sweet and sour sort of strange riff that they do, right? And so it's like this slightly more melodic, but kind of like nose wrinkling version of Neon Nights kind of thing, right? So it's the same formula. Start off with a super fast one. The solo might even be better on this than on Neon Nights, and it's also kind of a cool melodic, interesting solo, a neat phrasing on it, cool break on this song as well. I don't particularly like that title, Turn Up the Night. It's getting a little hair metal-y for me. Obviously this is way before hair metal. It's November 4th, 81. So they are about a year and a half later. They're putting this out. Greg Hildebrandt album cover, that great album cover. And Hack, you called it the Mob Rules earlier. Don't do that. It's called Mob Rules.
I know it's just
the song
Mob
is called
Rules.
The Mob Rules.
I know the song, but not the album. I know.
I have to deal with that all the time, right? But yeah, great song. We go into Voodoo again. Tony's soloing is amazing, but he also is getting incredible tone. And I don't know if that's for Martin, credit to Martin Birch or what. Obviously, the big difference here, Vinny is playing the drums, and this one has that cool thing that he does where when he's hitting the beat, he's kind of like pinging the ride cymbal at times as well. And I just picture him playing like reaching out and just like he's got this kind of light touch but heavy at the same time. It's a weird sort of feel you get out of him, right? And Hack, like you said, there's kind of a minimalist thing, but when he's playing minimally, he'll also put things in strange beats, and sometimes he'll start a fill early in the bar, like I joked about earlier, but it'll still be a simple fill, right? Loves his snare drum as well. And so this album, and Pete and I have talked about this many times, that, you get a completely different Martin Birch production this time. It's just much more, echoey and boomy and bassy, whereas the previous one was sort of tight and urgent, right? So have we lost Hack completely? Or
how do we lose our host? How is that possible?
I don't know. Yeah, you're right. That's kind of weird. And I don't hear him responding. So maybe we should just keep going, eh?
I guess we should just keep going. Yeah.
Okay. So Pete, what do you think of Turn Up the Night and Voodoo?
I love Turn Up the Night. It's kind of like Neon Night's baby brother, right? But it's still lots of fun. The production is night and day from this album and the other one. I always call this the dry album, and this is the wet album when it comes to the production. This is just like this oozing production on this one. I think Tony is kicking in the wah-wah pedal a lot in this song. I don't have an issue with it at all. I think the band, geezers booming. Vinny just fits right in. I think it's a really, really fun song. It's maybe not the absolute monster classic the Neon Knights is, but it's, like I said, it's not that far behind. Great opener. I mean, it just gets you right into the album. Yeah, the title of it sucks, but whatever. It is what it is.
Now, do you call that, is that like an obscure minor key that's in, or how would you describe that strange riff? Yeah,
it's I mean, he's obviously probably doing that in a drop key. I don't know. I never even attempted to play it, so I don't know.
Yeah,
it's awesome, right? Though. It's different than anything else he's ever done, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Right. Well, maybe we'll find out what Hack thinks of these two songs, but in the meantime, I'll move on to the rest of them.
It's become Friday morning, everybody. So
exactly, yeah. So next we have Sign of the Southern Cross.
All right, I'm
back just in time. So forget Sign of the Southern Cross. Let's go over to Hack.
What I missed?
And tell us about Turn Up the Night and Voodoo.
Oh, my turn.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had like a power just kind of went, and then it came back, and then of course it takes a while for the internet to come back on. But you guys were still running, so good.
Yeah.
Okay, there was no dead spots. Turn Up the Night, yeah, killer tune. I mean, up tempo, heavy, great opener, just like Neon Knights. I was gonna say there's a lot of songs on this record that are kind of sister songs to Heaven and Hell. Turn Up the Night is the Mob Rules version of Neon Knights. Like now we've got Vinny doing the drums. I mean, the sound of this record, the bottom is there. It really helps with the drums. The drums just have so much power on this song throughout the whole record. I love the way Vinny plays. He plays always, well, not so much this song, but when you get to the slower stuff, he's always a little bit behind the beat. It's like the last possible moment is when he hits that drum, and it just creates this. It just makes everything so much heavier and just makes everything sound so epic. I love Vinny's drums. As much as I love Ronnie singing, I love Vinny's drums on this record. And Geezer's bass playing is still prominent, but now it's got a little more oomph bottom, and it just killer. And this song is absolutely fantastic. Voodoo, love it. Tony Iommi riff. I mean, the guy is so inventive. I learned how to play that riff. All he's doing is he's basically, those are notes right out of the minor pentatonic scale in A minor. Everybody that's ever played guitar knows this scale, but to play it that way and make a riff out of that is so inventive and so creative and so cool. And the other thing too, the guitar sound on this record is probably my favorite guitar tone that Tony has ever had. It is big, it is massive, but it is still, how would I say it? Like, it's not boxy or you still hear all the notes, you still hear all the harmonic overtones. It's like the absolute perfect tone, on this album and every song. I mean, his riffs are just monstrous on this. I don't know how many tracks of guitars they layered to get that to sound that big, but just phenomenal. But yeah, those two songs, absolutely killer tracks, both of them.
I like when you're kind of trying to pair them up, and I'm thinking Voodoo kind of reminds me of this album's Lady Evil a little bit, right? It's a little groovy, right? It's mid-tempo, it's in the pocket, it's not super fast, not super slow, right?
But it's a better song.
I like it way better than Lady Evil.
Better song.
Yeah.
Better. All right.
So the next one, I just want to point out, first of all, at the same time, we've got Blue Oyster Cult records with Martin Birch and does Cultosaurus Erectus in 80. They do Fire of Unknown Origin in 81. Now, I find the production narrative doesn't line up at all, but there's one similarity that I feel, which is kind of a neat, subtle similarity. With Cultosaurus Erectus and Heaven and Hell, you still get a band that feels like they're they're a little isolated. They're a little not completely, fully of this world. Way more of this world than Never Say Die was, right? But they still feel like we still got something to prove. We're just a band. We're getting into our skunk works and working out this music. It's us against the world. And then with the second one, Fire of Unknown Origin and Mob Rules, it's like we're fully participating in capitalism now. We're part of the music industry. We're at all the parties. We're rocking out. We're a corporate band. So I feel that that's kind of a neat similarity between the two. Okay, Sign of the Southern Cross. Super slow, almost too slow for me. Again, I feel like they're on their way to the Tony Martin years. That flashy title always kind of rubbed me the wrong way. The Sign of the Southern Cross, right? It's just goes a little too far. But yeah, pretty cool. Heavy one. It's got that epic feel that takes you back to Stargazer almost for the verses, because it is so restrained. And then you got E5150, which is pretty weird how it's, Eddie Van Halen's studio name is in there, right?
Yeah.
But it's a good little instrumental. It's quite long, 251, leading up to Mob Rules. We know the story about Mob Rules, where, there's a previous version, part of the heavy metal movie. But this is the newer version recorded for the album. Love it. It's a bit kind of swingy and shuffly at the same time. It sounds like tanks rolling through the desert. It's just got such a big, massive groove to it. You guys mentioned Geezer's bass earlier. Here, it's not so articulated. Everything's melted together. This feels like that album cover. It feels really like a desert haze. This production, right? Everything's melded and melted in this big mess, and Geezer's part of it too. So, and you really hear that on this song because it's a real wall of sound song. So yeah, I love it. It's pretty cool. Love the fills from Vin on this one. Yeah, it's it fits in. It's always been for me part of the Turn Up the Night Neon Nights trilogy almost. These are the beers on the Friday night, get ready to party sort of songs on these albums.
Yeah. All right. So we're doing so Pete, Sign of Southern Cross, E5150, and the Mob Rules.
I absolutely adore the Sign of the Southern Cross. I think it's the big doomy track on this album. I love it. It's just full of menace and piss and vinegar. And man, Ronnie is just like, it's just so good.
Yeah.
And man, that slow riffing just kills me. It's just so good. It's got this dark, menacing atmosphere to it that I just absolutely love. It's again, I think for me, the Sign of the Southern Cross is like the doomy stepchild of Heaven and Hell, kind of.
Yeah.
There's like all these, there's so many songs on these two albums that are kind of related in a weird way. Like not that they sound similar, but like there's like one song from this album would be the sequel or the younger sibling to something from the first album.
Maybe a little disturbing the priest to it too,
Yeah, a little bit, Martin. Yeah, for sure. Yep.
I mean, no more like Zero the Hero, I suppose. Yeah, Zero the Hero is whatever.
Yeah, either one, but yeah, for sure. It's the big epic on this album. I just love it. E5150 is just great. I mean, there's just shit going on all over the place on that, and I've sometimes come down on some of Sabbath's little instrumental bits on some of these albums, right? Like on Born Again, a great album, but you got these couple little things that are just like a waste of time. It's like, could we just had a regular, put the Falling on there and take off those little Stonehenge things? But I think E5150 is great, and it's a perfect segue into the Mob Rules, which is a absolute barn burner. I mean, a monster of a track. I mean, Martin, I love the way you kind of said Neon Nights, Turn Up the Night, and the Mob Rules are kind of like a trio. Absolutely. And I think I like Mob Rules better than those two tracks as much as I love those two. I think Mob Rules is just amazing. The opening riff is great. The way it just stomps halfway through and just demolishes everything in its path. And yeah, killer song. One of the best metal songs from this time period from any band.
And I guess the chorus, it's not really a chorus. It's almost like a long pre-chorus. And then he just says the Mob Rules. It's that type of chorus. And it's also a heavy metal gallop that he does there. You get some new energy blown into it when you get to that pre-chorus / chorus thing, right?
Yeah. And then, when he's singing, when he says fools, you got him saying that and Tony's doing that. It just perfectly goes together.
It's one of the rare times Tony uses a whammy bar.
I know, right? I wonder what guitar he was using for this when he recorded this in the studio.
I think he had an SG with a wiggle stick on it.
Really?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Bigsby or something, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Sign of the Southern Cross. My God. That's like the biggest, heaviest guitar tone I've ever heard on a freaking record. It's just monstrous. And the drums just hang back, like just like it's so big. And then you got Dio just belting it. I mean, what an amazing song. And then that breakdown, it just got those like and all that kind of stuff. It's just holy shit. So creative, so cool. Like, how do you come up with this stuff, and make it work within a song, right? Because if you think about just the riff, the main riff, the Sign of the Southern Cross, it's really nothing. Dun 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 dun. There's nothing there. But because the guitar sounds like it does, and then you hear like Geezer underneath going boom boom boom, like it turns something that you would, if you were fooling around on the guitar and you came up with that riff, you wouldn't give it a second thought. But Sabbath takes that riff, makes it a monster, throws Geezer on it. You got Dio singing on it, and it's like the best shit on the planet. You know what I mean?
It's funny you say that, Hacker, because you could picture like Tony running into Geezer's and Vinny's hotel room with his acoustic guitar player saying, I listen to this, I wrote a new song. Ding, 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 ding. Yeah. I don't know, Tony. I'm not hearing that one.
Oh, that's funny. And 5150, it's got all this, it's got those really scary sounds in there. That spooky stuff, which is really cool. I mean, he's doing that all with a guitar for the sound of it,
You know what?
So
Sounds like it should have been on Women and Children First, right? It's an Eddie Van Halen instrumental.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. And then and it's a beautiful intro to Mob Rules. And Mob Rules for me is the Die Young. That's what the Mob Rules. That's the sister song. I mean, the riff is absolutely killer. He plays the riff, and then he stops, and who else but Dio? Yeah, come on. And it's like, blah, blah, blah. I mean, come on. Like, is there anything better than that? Like this, there's no words. It's one of the best freaking songs out there. Heavy. You want to get pumped up, and you want to go to the gym and you want to lift that extra 5 pounds. Put this thing on, man. What an absolutely killer track. Powerhouse vocals. The riff is insane. Just unbelievable song. I just love it. But like you said, yeah, everything kind of sounds like one big guitar with the bass in there, and the drums. It's fantastic. All right. Now we get to side 2. We got Country Girl and Slipping Away.
Yeah, Country Girl, they get a lot of stick for that. I mean, I remember sitting with Geezer and him making fun of Ronnie for that one, right? With that title, but and the lyric a little bit, it's a little bit of but the thing about this song that I just love, I've always loved this song. It's got a true Tony Iommi Geronimo riff to kick things off, right? It sounds like a Cowboys and Indians battle going on with that riff, right? And then you've got the big, China cymbal type sound with Vinny just going and then it kicks off, right? Couple of the other parts are a little substandard compared to that great verse riff, but I totally love it. I think it's a great song. It is a little more accessible, but I think it's really cool. It's got that little mellow break in it. Again, great tone on the solo. Slipping Away is a funny one. I was playing it again thinking this is really Vinny getting to play kind of like John Bonham-esque, right? It's like a funky thing that you can imagine being on like Houses of the Holy or a deep track on Physical Graffiti or something. It's got that sort of stilted, cool Led Zeppelin funky kind of vibe. I would love to hear a Led Zeppelin AI version of this, right? Get Jimmy's guitar tone on there, get Robert's vocal on there, and get a Bonham sound and just hear what this sounds like if Led Zeppelin did this song. But it is a little bit of this album's the parallel to Wishing Well and Walk Away. It's one of those where it's like the experimental, accessible, non-doomy song on here. But again, I love these albums so much that it's still a really good song for me, the same way Wishing Well is still a really good song for me, not so much Walk Away. So yeah, I quite like it, but yeah, it's got this interesting choppy sort of vibe to it. It's stilted, right? And like I say, very Zeppelin-esque. So that's your next two.
All right, Pete.
I think Country Girl as well. Country Girl is lots of fun. It's really different. It's got a cool riff. Yeah, the kind of middle thing is a little bit different, and but I still like it. I think it's got a good vibe. It kind of sticks out on this album, but I don't mind it at all. I've always been a big fan of Country Girl. It's kind of a cool, upbeat way to start off side two. Slipping Away is somewhat average to me, but I really love the back and forth soloing from Tony and Geezer on it. I think it's great. It's interesting because like Uriah Heep did something very, very similar on the Abominog album. And I think this bands were kind of doing this sort of thing around this time. And, Tony's just like shredding, right? Kicking on the wah-wah pedal and just, yeah. But I like it for that. It's fun. It's not a classic song by any means, but Slipping Away is kind of fun. But I like both of them. I think they're both really good.
Well, for me, Country Girl is, talking about the difference, in the music with Dio as opposed to the stuff that they did with Ozzy. Country Girl to me is the only song that kind of sounds like Old Sabbath. And the way Dio sings it, he's singing to the riff. Been in love with a country girl. Nah, nah. Like that's what Ozzy would do, right? Yeah. That's like the only song of these two records that I could, you could substitute one for the other is Country Girl.
Sounds like a Volume 4 song almost. Yeah.
Yeah. It could be on a Ozzy Sabbath. Anyways, but I love that song. I've always loved it. There's that breakdown where it almost, oh my God, almost sounds like a love song there for a minute. And it comes back in, right? Yeah. But I always love Country Girl. I think it's a great tune. And Slipping Away, that's one of these. They used to play Slipping Away on the radio when this record came out. I actually heard Slipping Away on the radio, and didn't get a lot of play, but it did get some play. And to me, Slipping Away is like if you took a Zeppelin riff and Tony played it with the heavy guitar, because that is a Zeppelin riff.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That sounds very Zeppelin-esque. It's that A, pull down the G, hit the A chord thing that Zeppelin does all the time. And but I love the song and I love the riff, and that back and forth, that trading is just like it's amazing. Like to hear them actually jam, and then the drums on that, and the song has so much bottom. It just kicks through the speakers, man. It's got so much power. Slipping Away, I don't know. I like it more than most people, but for me, that's a hidden gem on this record, Slipping Away.
Nice.
All righty. Now we've got Falling Off the Edge of the World.
Yeah, so here I feel like the riff is up to that same really sinister, devilish, cool, creative standard as the Heaven and Hell riff, right? It's got that little bit, of Ritchie Blackmore to it, a little bit of the Egypto, Middle Eastern kind of vibe, right? With the little flair to it. Funny thing about this one though, it doesn't get going past that big long Iron Maiden intro until 2:12 of the song, right? So it's 5 minutes long on the dot pretty much, and it doesn't get going until 2:12. So it's got this long drawn out mellow piece at the front, and then it just kicks off, and then it's got that killer riff, great groove from Vin, and then we go over to Over and Over. This is a slow, doomy blues. It sounds like something that could have been on the Black Sabbath album from 1970 or the 13 album when Rick Rubin sang "Do Something" like the Black Sabbath album from 1970, right? So it's just, to me, it's kind of like a stodgy, starchy, doomy blues. I'm completely bored by it. It's my least favorite song on the album, by far. So yeah, I don't need to hear them do this, but yeah, it is so funny how it lines up with "Lonely Is the Word" as the last
Yeah,
song. That was pretty
last
cool how
song.
you pointed
Yeah,
that out. Yeah.
that's the sister song. Yeah,
Yep.
Pete.
Yeah, Falling Off the Edge of the World is epic. It's great. I love it. I kind of like the way they lead you on this false sense of security, and then just totally hit you with that riff, and it's just the rest of the way out, man. Oh, just so good. The way this lineup like brings that sense of drama and menace is like unmatched. I think it's just so good.
Yeah.
Over and over. I don't think it's a great song, but man, Tony just goes berserk at the end of it, which I love. Again, it just like the last song on the last album. I don't think it's a great song, but I just listen to it to hear Tony doing these bluesy solos, and I think his solo was even better on this one, arguably. But the song itself is really nothing, leading up to that. It's not much of anything, but yeah, I don't know. It's to me, it's a very similar way to end a great album, exactly like they did on Heaven and Hell. It's weird how both albums kind of start off the same way and end the same way.
End the same way. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Very strange. But
yeah. Well, you said a word that I was going to use, drama. These guys had a lot, the way the arrangements and some of the songs, man, they introduce a lot of drama, a lot of light and shade. They kind of set you up for different things. Falling Off the Edge of the World, the way it starts, it's sort of like it's a sort of weird kind of, almost like Alice Cooper-y kind of like, make you uncomfortable guitar. And then this slab of tone, like, holy shit, that's like Godzilla destroying Tokyo, man. It's unbelievable. And then you think, okay, it's going to be a slow, like a Sign of the Southern Cross, like that. But no, then it changes again. And then this crazy ass riff, and it's really hard to play because I've tried to play this. And it just, then the band takes off and it's just intense. And then there's, Ronnie singing his ass off, like, oh, it's just incredible, man. Just another barn burner of a song, another hidden gem on this record. Like, this is absolute top shelf. There's no better Sabbath than that song for me. I mean, that song,
the snare is just like,
dun, 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 dun. They're so locked in, they're so tight. It's perfect, and just to go through, like, literally in one song, 3 different moods, right? Like, they got one intro, then you think, oh no, it's not that, it's this other intro, and then this riff comes in. Like, they've taken you through 3 different paths in one song, like that. That's crazy shit, man. And then over and over, it's like, well, okay, here we go. It's the end of the record. Yeah. Hey, Tony, we need another song. It's another Lonely Is the Word, right? It's like the same thing, man. But there you go. Mm-hmm. But you know what? You had 4 absolute classics on Heaven and Hell. For me, on this record, they don't have the notoriety, right? Like, there's nothing on here that has the notoriety of, say, a Heaven and Hell. Mm-hmm. But man, I'll put Sign of the Southern Cross up against Heaven and Hell. Maybe there's nothing here of the notoriety of Die Young, but you know what? Shit, I'll put Mob Rules up against Die Young. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It doesn't get the recognition, this record, as Heaven and Hell, but I think anything you stack up on Heaven and Hell, you can stack up just as well with this record. So, yeah. All right. With that said, this is a versus. Who wins, guys?
All right. Well, I think I'm going to go with Heaven and Hell. I just feel like there's a little more mystique to it. There's a little bit of, like I say, a little bit of that. We're still a gang. We're on our own. It's us against the world. We're not, we still have something to prove. It just feels a little more European, a little less corporate and commercial and a little, just a little less slasher horror movie kind of thing. Like like I say, it feels like they're on their way to some of the cliches that are in the Tony Martin years. You think of Headless Cross and things like that, right? So but I still love it to death, and it's I just love the heaviness and the warmth of it and stuff. But there's just something about the first one that's just got the extra kind of like mystery and creepiness and even isolation and loneliness to it, right? It just seems a little closer to Rainbow Rising, to me. It's just a tiny bit more magic. And you know what? If I was to mash all these together and rate all these songs, I still would probably put Neon Nights, Heaven and Hell, and Die Young first before I got to any songs off of this one. So I'm going Heaven and Hell.
All right. Fair. Pete?
I feel like I've been putting these two albums against each other for like 40 years. And really, that's really what's happened. It's really hard to choose between these two because I've been telling everybody for decades that I prefer this one just by a little. But I will say I probably listen to this one more of late. But in saying that, there are 4 songs on here that are just they're hard to beat. They really are. As much as I think Mob Rules, Sign of the Southern Cross, and Falling Off the Edge of the World is right up there. Maybe not quite. I think for me, my favorite song is the title track on this album. And I think that is just about as good as almost as anything on Heaven and Hell. But I love these albums both. But I got to give the slight. I think this album is more consistent, start to finish, but this has a couple songs that just eclipse anything on here for me.
All righty. Well, I'm going to be the contrarian. For me, it's Mob Rules. And I'll tell you, and you just nailed it. Consistency.
Yeah.
There's more to love on Mob Rules than there is on Heaven and Hell. There's not one song. Okay, let's take Over and Over out of the equation, right? But there's not one song on here that is I don't want to say as bad. That's not because they're not bad songs on Heaven and Hell, but the worst song on here for me is still better than Wishing Well, still better than Lady Evil, still better than what was the other one?
Walk Away, probably.
Walk Away. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. For me, I think if we take like Lonely Is the Word and Over and Over out of the equation, and I look at like Voodoo, Country Girl, and Slipping Away against Lady Evil, Wishing Well, and Walk Away, I would probably take the 3 songs on Mob Rules.
Yeah, because Voodoo is a killer song.
Voodoo kind of tips it, right, for me, but the other 2 are pretty damn good, especially Country Girl.
Country Girl's fantastic. I mean, I mentioned how much I love Slipping Away, So these are just songs that it's like, man, you put them side by side, Mob Rules takes it, And this is, of course, I'm not saying that Heaven and Hell's a bad record. You're comparing like 2 incredible records, but there has to be a little bit of an edge. And for me, it goes Mob Rules, 100%. So there you go. Cool. All right. So, Martin, you got anything you want to talk about? Anything coming up book-wise, show-wise?
Well, I do have, if people like their Sabbath, I've still got the Early Days Sabbath, big whole story of Sabbath book, and then the Later Days one where these 2 albums are talked about in great length. So that's everything for the rest of it. And if you like your Ronnie, I've still got the Rainbow book. I've got that available as well. So other than that, martinpopoff.com for all the books. We've got the audio podcast, History in 5 Songs with Martin Popoff. The Kicked in the Teeth and AC/DC podcast that I do with John Gaffney. We've got a really interesting Sea of Tranquility for tomorrow, kind of a cool philosophical one, a little bit. That's about it. The latest books, I suppose, were that Led Zeppelin visual biography and the Queen Live, working on some panel books, working on a Rainbow panel book, and then a couple of Genesis ones after that.
Cool. Links to Martin's website and also the Contrarians are below. What about yourself, P? What's coming up?
Let's see. For all you thrash fans, we've got a ranking the albums of Germany's Sodom coming up on Sunday. All 16 albums. So I'm going to be joined by Ryan Scow and Count Ralphus from Hudson Valley Squares on that on Sunday. We've got the UK Connection on Saturday. Me and Martin tomorrow. So yeah, lots going on SOT over the next couple days.
Nice.
Cool. So, folks, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. I got a stat that 80% of my viewers aren't subscribed. So please hit that subscribe button. It doesn't cost you a dime, and it definitely helps the channel. So what's coming up with me? Well, recommend an album to review. I didn't do one today because we're doing this show, but next Thursday I will be doing one every Thursday at 7 o'clock. I will be doing a live July hangout, but I will let you'll see the when I post for that event, but that'll be sometime in July. It'll be a Saturday night, probably at around 9 o'clock. Yeah, if you want to help support the channel, the links are below to buy merch like the shirts and the hats, and check out my playlist. I've got about 30 original songs. They're in the playlist on YouTube. They're also available on Spotify, Apple Music, all your streaming services. Just type in Guitar Hack and have a listen. So I want to thank these gentlemen, and I want to thank everybody for watching. You guys absolutely rock. You always make these monthly shows a lot of fun. And hang on, guys, and we will catch you next month. Cheers.